So I've always been fascinated by deserts, whether that was in Dune or in real life or in movies, but specifically Zelda. And I feel like with this video, I finally have the opportunity to talk about the pure significance of the deserts in the Legend of Zelda franchise. So yes, we're going to be talking about the deserts in the Legend of Zelda games. I will be going by the beginning of the timeline to the most recent part of the timeline, so yes, Tears of the Kingdom will be mentioned in this. If you're confused as to what the timeline is even, I posted a link in the description for you to check out. It's only 7 minutes long and it explains it pretty well. So yes, highly recommend you watch that video before you check out this video, so that way you can kind of get a sense as to what I'll be talking about. Because I will not only be explaining the locations of the deserts, I will also be explaining the lore and the connections and the adaptations that have to do with the timeline, the Triforce, Hyrule, etc., etc. So let's cut right to the chase. Lanayru Desert, Skyward Sword. The Lanayru Desert is a gigantic surface world that covers the majority of its terrain with quicksand and/or regular sand. According to the Hyrule Historia book on page 52, it says that long ago it was lush with greenery, but several hundred years ago it began a sudden transition into desertification. In addition to this, the book also says that ancient robots were used here to mine a powerful ore known as time shift stones. So canonically speaking, this first desert in the Zelda timeline used to be like Faron Woods. It was very forest-like, but it had lots of ancient power and activity. We also tend to see those patterns through the other desert areas in the Zelda franchise, whether it is through the ancient technology performances or the traces of desert power. It all connects to the origin of the Triforce. With that being said, the Lanayru Desert has to be the closest discovery to finding the first signs of how the Zelda universe came to be, through something as rhythmic as the robots or the time shift stones, or to be something more monumental like the Thunder Dragon or the original Gate of Time. So, let's look at these concepts at a closer glance. First things first, the time shift stones and the robots. The time shift stones are the movement in Lanayru Desert. It possesses so much ancient power while the robots keep it under control. These time stones also gives access to complete a multitude of places such as the Lanayru mining facility, the shipyard, the sand shift, pirate stronghold, pretty much all the areas that are filled with sand. Fun fact, I love pirate-based missions or anything associated with pirates, so I thoroughly loved doing the sand ship quest with Captain Skipper. It was one of my favorite quests, and it never leaves my head when I write these kinds of videos or think about the franchise. And in real life, pirate history goes a long way. It goes all the way back to 14th century BCE. So I really liked how the designers and the writers of Skyward Sword put some pirate history in Lanayru Desert. Even if Miyamoto did not realize this notion, it's still a nice touch to add. Number 2, the Thunder Dragon. The Thunder Dragon is the protector of the desert and aligns with the other dragons to help you learn the Song of the Hero. He is also a symbolic reference to the wisdom aspect of the Triforce, or also known as Nehru. So there is definitely a connection to the ancient power that the goddess Hylia created along with the goddesses of the Triforce, which then leads to number 3, the Gate of Time. There are 2 gates of time in Skyward Sword. One is in the Sealed Ground Temple, and one is in the Lanayru Desert, which is labeled to be the first Temple of Time. Link stumbles upon it after completing the Lanayru mining facility, then Lady Impa destroys it in order to protect Zelda since Girahim decided to join in on the fun. Plot aside, the Gates of Time are the first creations of the time machines in the Zelda universe. It is what connects to the present to the past. It is also what connects to worlds beyond our imagination, but most of all, it's what connects the ancestry of the Zelda lore to the present heroes and princesses of Hyrule. And Lanayru Desert ties all of those pieces together as the earliest points of Zelda, so that the chosen hero and Hylia reincarnated can venture forth into their fates of destiny. Gerudo Valley / Spirit Temple, Ocarina of Time. Gerudo Valley is essentially the birthplace of the Gerudo. According to Zelda Wiki, Link first encounters the Gerudo tribe during his younger years, when the Gerudo's tight security at the bridge took away any chance of proceeding into their domain. But then, adult Link has to overcome the various obstacles and shady lore that presides in this land. Before the purity of the Gerudo tribe, Ganondorf was the king of the valley alongside with Naboru. In addition to this, there's the Gerudo warrior who protects the Gerudo fortress. And of course, who can forget about the iconic Gerudo witches, which is Kukume and Kudkate, aka Twin Rova. Why am I talking about all these characters when this video only discusses the lands and the lore of these games? Well, it's simply this. This valley alone is what makes the intensity of the Gerudo tribe come to life. It is what makes this valley have so much significance, especially when it comes to the quest Link completes by learning how to fight like a Gerudo and trying to rescue Naboru, which, doesn't that remind you of a certain thing in Breath of the Wild? So without these characters, there would be no use in this land. It might as well just be a boring land if it didn't have its climactic history. It also connects towards the Spirit Temple, since Link is gifted to head forth into that temple by training in Gerudo courses. So now we move on to the Spirit Temple. Unlike the other various temples in Ocarina of Time, this temple is quite peculiar. It has lots of weird symbols and a statue she calls the Goddess of the Sand, aka the Desert Colossus. Once I did some digging, I realized that this temple is very similar to temples in actual ancient history. For comparison, according to the Zelda Universe website, if you look at the Spirit Temple's winged sun, it references to the various sun religions or gods used in ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. I would also like for us to turn back to the Colossus statue for a second. Since she represents this area of the Gerudo Valley, she is most likely a role model of sorts. It is what keeps the Gerudo inspired, and as such, she and the Spirit Temple are products of an ancient Gerudo religion that borrows divine symbols from ancient cultures in the real world. For example, if you look at the formation of her arms and hands, it looks very close towards the Faravar from the
Zoroastrianism.
In other words, is a male sun god with wings. So you can tell that Miyamoto did his research with lots of cultures and religions. It's also a cool association to see how the Gerudo religion and culture was inspired by those religions. So to close off this section, these two lands in Ocarina of Time have to be one of the coolest parts to analyze in Zelda history. From the ancient beginning of Lanayru Desert to the birth of a desert tribe, it's quite interesting to see how those adaptations were brought to life. And as we move further, there will be more adaptations similar to these findings. Now, this is where things get really, really confusing because of the Zelda timeline splitting. So feel free to reference back to the video that I have recommended at the beginning if you are confused with what I'm saying. But just note that from this moment forward, I'm going to be discussing the games in a strange format. I will be going from the hero is defeated section to the hero is triumphant sections after. So with the hero is defeated timeline, we have the main games, A Link to the Past, and The Adventures of Link. So let's start off with A Link to the Past. Link to the Past, The Desert of Mystery. I'm doing this one first since it is technically the prequel to The Legend of Zelda and The Adventure of Link. The Link to the Past game has a desert land called the Desert of Mystery. Over the entire southwest portion of Hyrule within the Light World, it is only accessible from the east through the Great Swamp. This is the first trace of light versus the Dark World, and that theme slowly passes on to other timelines of the game, such as Twilight Princess, A Link Between Worlds, and maybe Tears of the Kingdom, but that's more of a land-based game than the alternative universe. Tourism-wise, the entrance is the most significant with the location of the Pendant of Wisdom, which can reference towards the general notion of the wisdom part of the Triforce, or a modification towards Nehru's Thunder Dragon or Silent Realm. As far as goes with the land's archaeology, not much is known about this land, but there are tons of theories saying that is either a place where it was once a land filled with other races before the Gerudo tribe, since there are sandworms, and maybe it lies a little bit farther west from the Gerudo Desert. Or it could just be another part of Hyrule since the Pendant of Wisdom is kept there, which means the land has had Hylian ancestry. Regardless, it's quite an elusive area of the game. The Adventure of Link, the Tantari Desert. The Tantari Desert is a small sandy plain north of North Castle, known for its single isolated cave. Lore-wise though, it's got some hidden tea. With this cave/desert, there is a stolen trophy that is owned by a woman and her uncle in the town of Ruto. After Link defeats the thief, Link gains the jump spell, in which he is able to use it for the rest of the game. Now, the desert itself is not actually as significant as you may think, but the trophy is actually the statue of the goddess. And the thief, called Agoria, which is a sneaky devil or a wolf-like creature, specifically targets Link. Now, Gorias are usually located in plateaus or cave locations. They can either be good or bad depending on the Zelda game. Regardless, they tend to take valuable items for good or bad purposes. I'm getting sidetracked with this character, but I just thought I'd like to share that hidden gem with you all. Nonetheless, the Tantari Desert I think is quite cool. Majora's Mask, Ikana Valley and Ikana Castle. Technically speaking, Majora's Mask does not have any desert locations, but I wanted to discuss Majora's Mask within the desert regions, as Ikana has similar qualities of other Legend of Zelda desert terrain. And by similar qualities, I mean the possible references in the lore itself. So, Ikana Valley. The Ikana Valley itself is considered to be the darkest part of the entire game. As if you think Child Link has been traumatized enough by death and the pressure of immediate destruction of the world, Ikana Valley is the cherry on top. It's located in the eastern part of Termina, which is known to be cursed because it's filled with the dead, and filled with the spirits who linger with regret and hatred, according to Zelda Wiki. The land itself is quite barren with Gibdos, Ikana's composer Sharp and his brother Flat, Gyros, and Pose, and they all seem to jive with one another, especially with the Gibdos in the Ikana Castle, because there's also a ghost researcher with her daughter in which he almost dies at some point, which is such a sad cutscene to watch. All in all, Ikana is hauntingly beautiful. It takes in all of the dead, but it also pays the price of death itself. But how does this valley connect to the desert areas in the Zelda universe? Well, lore speaking, it might be because of what follows within the valley, which is Ikana Castle. Ikana Castle belongs to the kingdom of Ikana. From Zelda Wiki, it was founded in the mountains barricading Termina's east face and was ruled by the Ikana royal family. The loyalty of its subjects is unwavering, and they continue to serve their kingdom even in death, which is why it feels so strange and ghost-like. Igos Ikana, the king of Ikana Castle, still sits within the kingdom. Not much is known about Igos or where he came from, but his fellow wingmen mock him for his actions. This mockery could mean that Igos' stubbornness is what led to Ikana being a place that is only filled with the dead. I did, however, find something interesting about Ikana itself. After the kingdom's demise, Ikana had an army that was led by Captain Skullkida, who was a very close servant to the King of Hyrule. There were also notions that the Ikana kingdom had skills in the arts, specifically music and dance. But then came the Gero. The Gero is known to be ninjas/spies that infiltrated Ikana's royal land. Eventually, this led to the downfall of the Ikana people, but the Ikana graveyard is still very well guarded. There is not a specific reason why, but I think the rivalry between the Gero and the Ikana kingdom proves enough. So once Link arrives into the valley, it is a complete wasteland. But to answer the questions as to why it connects towards the deserts in other Zelda games, it is because of how the history of Ikana has a lot of reminiscence towards Gerudo Valley. Ikana took pride in their land much like the Gerudos do. The Ikana kingdom has various practices and specified skills, much like the Gerudo does with their religion and fighting skills. And when you look at the timeline, you begin to realize that how Ikana Valley were almost erased from Zelda history due to the timeline splitting and the Geros wiping them out. So without Child Link successfully defeating Ganondorf, there would be no such traces of Ikana, or possibly no Ikana Kingdom, which is most likely what happened in the defeated timeline. All in all, Ikana has desert energy because of the alike history and the Hylian connections towards the royal family. Twilight Princess, Gerudo Desert, and Arbiter's Grounds. Besides the Lanayru Desert, the Gerudo Desert and the Arbiter's Grounds has to be one of my favorite locations in the entire franchise. But anyways, the desert is quite vast, which includes the Arbiter's Grounds Temple, the Cave of Ordeals, and the Mirror of Twilight. Within the desert itself, there are no Gerudo tribes located. There is actually no exact reason why, but because Twilight Princess is almost an exact replica of Ocarina of Time, it is most likely that the Gerudo folk had to go in exile because of Ganondorf's actions. That is why they appear later in the timeline, but that's only just a theory. Now let's head to Arbiter's Grounds. According to the Zelda Archive, the term Arbiter also means judge. So the temple is a place for punishment and execution, which directly aligns with Ganondorf's execution and banishment to the Twilight Realm. It also refers to the sages near the Mirror of Twilight since they are known to be judges or arbiters. Nonetheless, the temple itself is a place that is far away from the rest of Hyrule, so that no one can come and find you. The temple itself could also correlate towards Ocarina of Time's Spirit Temple, since the designs are very similar with the Goddess of Sand statue, which they appear in both temples. There are also lots of enemies, such as the Re-Dead, another Ocarina of Time reference, which could mean that the spirits from the Spirit Temple or Gerudo Valley may have resided here and was left to die. But I'm only basing these off of theories, yet I feel like they connect, but don't take my word for it though, that's just pure speculation. Also, just another side note here, can we just discuss how awesome the boss fight was in Arbiter's Grounds? I don't know about y'all, but just laying on a piece of a Beyblade and spinning in this rotating circle, defeating an entire skeleton, is absolutely insane to me. I was having chills up and down my spine when I first played this game. It was absolutely crazy. And last but not least, since the timeline is now merging together, we move on to Breath of the Wild / Tears of the Kingdom. So, since Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are basically the same mods, we're going to be discussing the Gerudo region. Both of these games are the curtain calls for desert lands. Both have the exact same region, called the Gerudo region, which contains Gerudo Town, Kara Kara Bazaar, the 7 heroine statues, and much more iconic desert attractions. And if you thought that the Gerudo tribe forgot about their origin story, do not fret. They have not. They just might have mistaken a few steps. But Breath of the Wild champion Lady Urbosa definitely knew the start of their tribe, as Lady Urbosa said to her divine beast, "Naboru, Legend of Gerudo, celebrated over ages, and you, who were named to honor her, you are a legend as well. It is written that Calamity Ganon once adopted the form of a Gerudo, and that will make this victory all the more satisfying." So the history was not necessarily lost, and Naboru is more or less the inspiration of the present Gerudo descendants, and Lady Riju seems to be fitting that role quite well when she gains her sage power in Tears of the Kingdom. Other than these findings, the deserts in both of these games are identical modularly, and they're quite fun to explore in. There's also lots of hidden lore within the Gerudo areas that traces back to the Gerudo Valley in Ocarina of Time. In spite of that though, there are so many places to explore by sand seal surfing, racing, and through general exploration. So yeah, we've reached the end of the desert lands. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you watched this all the way through, thank you very much. That really means a lot to me. Feel free to stay tuned for my next videos. Next week I'll be releasing some Majora's Mask soundtracks for you all, and then after that it'll be Tears of the Kingdom. I truly appreciate you all checking out these kinds of videos and commenting your feedback, so I'm really looking forward to see what you have to say about this specific video. And also, if you have any recommendations as to what I should be talking about next, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. And I hope this video was a little bit better than my prior one, because even though I made some really good points in my Skyward Sword one, I feel like I just wasn't executing it properly, so I'm hoping that my punctuality and the sources that I've used were a little bit better, and I hope I was up to those standards. I'll be heading out. Thank you all so much again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!